Welcome to episode 74 of the Eat for Endurance podcast. My name is Claire Shorenstein, and I'm a board-certified sports dietitian and runner based in Santa Cruz, California. I provide virtual nutrition services to athletes of all abilities, and I host this podcast to demonstrate that there is no one-size-fits-all nutrition approach towards optimal health and performance. Today's episode is part of the Recreational Athlete Nutrition Profile series and features former pro volleyball player and now recreational endurance runner Alice Rosso. Alice contacted me a while back, sharing that she was a fan of the show and that she wanted to share her story. And of course, I love featuring a variety of stories and voices in the nutrition and sporting space, so I said yes. You'll hear Alice talking about growing up in Italy, living and training in her current home of Salt Lake City, her struggles with disordered eating and how it nearly destroyed her relationship with her Italian family, her ongoing work with a registered dietitian, and a very scary accident she had out on the trails that nearly killed her. I hope you all enjoy this one, and if any of you would like to be considered for a recreational athlete nutrition profile, please email me at claire@eatforendurance.com with some details about yourself and why you would like to share your story on the show. All right, so let's get to it. Here's my chat with recreational runner Alice Rosso. Alice, welcome to the Eat for Endurance podcast, and I'm very glad I just checked how to pronounce your name. I almost called you Alice, but we caught that one before we started. How has your day been so far?
Yeah, good. I am lucky enough to live in Salt Lake City, where we have beautiful mountains at our doorstep. So I just went on a beautiful sunrise hike with my dog, and it doesn't get any better than that, to be honest.
Oh, amazing. How long was your hike?
It wasn't too bad. It's just like about 5 miles. It's a big mountain, kind of like 10 minutes drive. And, like with a dog, I always try to be careful not to do anything too intense.
Yeah, for sure. And I see you just ran the Speed Goat 50K, and that race is like no joke. I looked it up recently only because a friend of mine who's originally from Utah was trying to convince me to do it next year. And I mean, I think there's over 11,000 feet of climbing. So I was like, maybe not for me, but I see that you did it. So congrats. How did that race go?
Thank you. Yeah, no, it went really well. I originally I wanted to like really race it and try to make it like my kind of like my step into the pro scene. But because of an injury I had 2 months prior, I just couldn't. And actually, the Speed Goat was exactly 2 months after my injury. And, it went great. I was able to complete it, and I finished in like over 8 hours, so 8:20. And I felt great. And my only goal for that race was really to just feel good. It's, obviously you don't run 50K with 11,000 feet of elevation and find it easy and enjoyable the whole time. But my goal was to never bonk, never, and I go into like a dark moment where I felt like I couldn't do it. And that was the case. I finished and I felt good about it. So it was really great. And I had you in my ears for a few hours, actually, because I'm a avid listener of the podcast.
That's so cool. I love that. And we'll, of course, get into nutrition a bit later. But since we're on the topic, how would you rate your nutrition for this race? I know you work with a dietitian as well. Do you feel like it went to plan? What kinds of products and foods did you use for this one?
I felt it went really great because, I have been experimenting with a lot of different things for like the last year, gels, solids, and liquids, like all the different like things. And then a few months ago, I was doing the rim to rim to rim. So it's like the Grand Canyon. And I arrived at Jeremy Ranch, and they didn't have anything but white bagels. And I was so tired, and my body just told me, like, you want white bagels right now. And I had that. And I discovered that just gave me so much life and energy. So actually for this race, I still had like, some gels and things, but I just bought my favorite bagels here in Salt Lake City, super salty, super delicious. And I just had bagels for the whole time. And it was great. Like I absolutely loved it. And, I had like people were like bonking left and right behind me. And I was just like with my bagel, and they were looking at me like, what are you doing? I was like, was great for me. So yeah, my nutrition went great. Obviously, hydration was a big challenge in that race because it was really hot. And there was especially one part where like the aid stations were pretty far. But I was able to pace myself, and people at the aid stations are always like all sorts of angels there, where they just kind of like throw water at you, gave you more water, and so yeah, I felt it went really, really good.
Awesome. How long have you lived in Salt Lake City?
Just a year and a half, actually. I was in Maine for a little while before that. And then before, I actually lived in London for 9 years, which, very little outdoor access over there.
Mm-hmm. I lived in London for, well, as you probably know if you heard my nutrition story, for about 4 years. So
Yeah.
it's it's interesting because it's kind of like easy to escape, and there are like places to run, but yeah, not like exactly mountains right nearby. You have to kind of go
Yeah,
some ways to get that.
Yeah. Like the biggest elevation is probably like a hill, like in
Yes.
Amsterdam Heat, and you're like,
Yes.
But
that is where we went for hilly runs. Yes.
Exactly.
All right, so let's rewind now. As you know, since you listen to the podcast, I like to start these interviews by digging into your nutrition roots. So you grew up in Italy. I'd love to hear about what that was like from a nutrition perspective in terms of, what you remember surrounding food and meal times.
Yeah. So for me, I mean, meal times has always been like the most fun part of the day. Like, I grew up in an Italian family where food was very much like a focal point of our day. And my parents loved to have family over. And every time it was like a big meal, a big celebration. So food was always a big part of my life. And also, I was at the time a professional volleyball player. So very different type of body, very different type of nutrition. And also I feel like in those years, like nutrition wasn't as much of a focus. Like I remember training volleyball and my coach never once brought up the nutrition issue. Like because it wasn't just like a part of the focus. It was just like training and, like performing at our best. But nutrition was in a way kind of simpler. Like in Italy, especially, like before big games, I would eat a big plate of pasta because that was, the carb load. And then after the games, we would go out and eat pizza. So that was our recovery meal, which, worked really well for us. So food has always been a very big part of my life, and especially cooking. Like with my mom, my mom is a great cook. And I've always loved cooking with her and trying to make these like very nourishing meals. And the more I grew up then, and the more I started getting more into like the running and the ultra running, I try to incorporate that in my nutrition a lot. Where like, yes, I wanna eat to perform, but also I wanna keep eating because I love it. Because like I wanna enjoy all different ingredients and flavors and carbs and cheeses and vegetables, maybe not before long runs, but like it's a very big part of our culture.
Yes, for sure. And where in Italy did you grow up?
I grew up in Milan, so in the northern part.
Awesome.
A lot of very earthy food, polenta and meat stews, and that's also where I started hiking because we have a little house just outside of Milan in the mountains there, and that's where I also started my passion for the mountains and hiking. That then I kind of came here and took to the extreme.
Yeah. And I mean, you mentioned that you got into volleyball at the age of 12, and you went pro for about 5 years until you were 23. So I'm really interested to hear, I mean, you started to kind of set the stage a little bit there, but I'm interested to hear like a bit about that journey of what food looked like for you as you became a more competitive athlete, because you were saying your coach never talked about food, but,
Yes.
and I know that there's disordered eating at some point where that became a problem. I'm not sure what the timeline is there, but maybe you can just share a little bit of that journey as a, competitive volleyball player, but as still, a teenager before you kind of went pro, and kind of how that all kind of unraveled.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny that, like actually when I was a pro, food was the last of my worries because I was, training a lot, and there were some comments sometimes around, like players that were bigger than me, and maybe my coach would like joke about, you need to lose some weight because you need to jump higher, but it was never like, it was kind of brushed off. And actually that's not where when my kind of like disordered eating started, was when I stopped playing volleyball.
Oh, interesting.
Because,
okay.
like when I was playing volleyball, I felt like I never had a problem because I was training so much that I could just eat again a pasta and then afterwards a pizza, and that wasn't even a question in my mind. But when I stopped playing, when I moved to the US and started having a much more like, I lost that big part of the training, the games, and all that physical activity. That's where the disordered eating started, because obviously I started seeing my body changing, because I wasn't an athlete anymore. I wasn't playing all those hours. And so as a response to trying to control my body, I started developing these like disordered eating patterns that then obviously are kind of like a downward spiral, because the more you see that, okay, this is working, then I'm like, okay, I'm controlling this. And, I'm an athlete, so I know that like, if you keep doing something and it's working, you keep doing it until it gets better. And that's what I was kind of doing.
Yeah. And what led you to stop playing volleyball?
Moving to the US, because I wanted to purchase a career in film, in filmmaking and screenwriting, and I hated Italian movies. And so if I needed to become a screenwriter, I needed to do it in the US. And so I decided to quit volleyball and just move to the US and keep following a different dream. And it was a very hard decision, but also it was a time where like all my teammates were also getting older like me in a way, and they started having kids, they started getting married, and volleyball wasn't a priority for any of us anymore.
At 23?
Yeah, in Italy,
what?
like I was one of the youngest players. Like I was people that were already like in their 30s. So it was different ages in our team.
Got it.
People like me or older people, but and also you start getting a job, and the training is like from 8 p.m. till 11 p.m. like 4 nights a week, plus the games on Saturday night. So that was basically all our life was for those years. And after a while, it just wasn't sustainable anymore, especially because there's very little money involved in volleyball. And unless you're not in part of like the national team, you're not going to make a life out of it.
Yeah, that's really interesting that the training would be that late. That seems so counterintuitive for an athlete who needs to prioritize sleep and recovery and all those things, right?
Yeah, but because, people had to have jobs. Like our coach knew that we were all like, or in uni and in Italy, it's not as good as in America. You have the teams with the college. So it's a very kind of like integrated part. In Italy, it's not like that at all. Like in Italy, colleges, universities, they don't really care about the sport as much. So it has to be done after school hours, after work. And so that was the only time that was possible, really.
Yeah. And it's funny. I mean, I don't really know all that much about volleyball, but when I think about Italy, I don't think of volleyball. So it's even interesting to me that you got into that and were playing it for so long. Is that something that you found like outside of school, or how were you even introduced to the sport?
Yeah. I mean, my dad was a volleyball player, and actually volleyball is pretty popular in Italy. It's much more popular in Italy than it is here, I think.
Got it.
And yeah, my dad was a volleyball player, and then I was a very active kid. I just wanted to play everything. Like I wanted to play basketball, volleyball, dancing. My mom wanted me to do ballet, and I got kicked out after a week because I just couldn't stay still, and I was just like bored. And so volleyball it was. But yeah, that's how I got introduced to it, and it's actually quite a popular sport in Italy. And it's quite competitive as well.
Okay. See, as I said, I don't know anything about volleyball. It's certainly not volleyball in Italy. So thanks for teaching me about that. So, I mean, you pursue this dream of screenwriting, and where do you go in the US? Where did you kind of first land?
first I moved to New York. Again, another big city with very little access to the mountains, but that was the place I needed to be to, do my school and follow my dreams. And that's where the disordered eating started, because I felt in New York, like between school and having like a job after to kind of like pay my bills, I just didn't have time to do sports anymore. And so I just controlled my eating behavior a lot because I didn't want to gain too much weight because I saw my body changing so much. And then after that, my visa expired, and so I moved to London, and I ended up staying there for 9 years. And again, like I feel like the disordered eating was more trying to control a situation. And when you leave your country, you leave your family to go pursue a career that you know nothing about in a city that you've never been, there is, you feel a lot out of control. Yeah. And so that's where I started then controlling my food a lot. And then, once back in London, when I started to have a more balanced life with like a regular job, I started reintroducing sport in my life, and actually found a lot of joy in it, because for all the years that I've been playing volleyball, I could not play anything else. Like I could not go run too much. I could not go skiing. I could not do anything else because, if I were to injure myself, my club would lose money because they would still have to pay me, but they couldn't use me. And so in my contract, they would kind of prevent us from doing anything else. And so in London, I started being like, okay, like what else do I like? What else can I do? And I just started, running. I started climbing in London, and just found that I found a lot of joy in just moving again, in finding control in something else that wasn't food,
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that's not one thing we have in common. I found my love of running, or at least, again, I rediscovered it, and certainly fell in love with distance running, and specifically in London. I mean, there's such a great run culture there. So when I was living there in my, mid-late 20s, that's when I kind of got back into it again, because I ran in high school and then later fell into it. It's, there are lots of great run clubs. There are just beautiful parks to run in. You can take the train and go out into the Lake District or wherever and just run in these beautiful places. You can hop on a plane and get into Europe very quickly. And it's, it's a great place. Yeah, I know. Me too, for sure. The short flights to different countries.
And where were you living in London?
I was right off of Bermondsey, right off, Bermondsey Street, so southeast.
Yeah.
So I lived there when it was still a little bit kind of borderline sketchy before it became completely like upscale gentrified. So now it's like super like bougie fancy, but it was like starting to go that way. Yeah. And I just loved being close to Borough Market and just near the river. And yeah,
I started long distance running because I was actually up north. And I just wanted to go to the Borough Market. Yeah. And during COVID, we couldn't do anything but, 1 hour a week, 1 hour a day of activity.
Yes.
And so me and my husband just started running, like wherever we needed to go. And that was like very far. And we started running to Hampstead Heath. And we did our first half marathon, I remember, just because we wanted to get to the park. And after that, we were both exhausted.
I would end every long run in Borough Market and basically get a Monmouth coffee and one of the amazing chorizo sandwiches that I still dream of. They're so good. From Brindisa or whatever that place is. London was amazing. But so you're in London for a while, but I guess I want to back up for a second. So with your eating disorder, I mean, it must have been also so disorienting. You're saying you're away from your family. Food is such a huge part of your culture and your family and how you guys connect and everything. And you're, suddenly by yourself, you don't know anybody. And of course, in a new kind of food environment. Of course, there's great Italian food in New York City, just great food generally, but still, it's probably a bit of a shock to be there. And so were you ever formally diagnosed with anything? Did you ever seek treatment? Was it kind of something you were just struggling with on your own in terms of the disordered eating? Like, what did that all look like?
Yeah, I feel like, the Italian mentality, especially with like therapy, is like brush it under the bed or under the,
Yeah.
because like we don't, anyone who seeks therapy in Italy is more like really big issues, like suicidal. You have to have gone through like something. So for me, it wasn't even a question in my mind. Like I didn't know that I started having disordered eating. I was just, I was raised in a family where my mom was cooking meals and her meals was delicious. And I didn't care what it was in terms of like carbs and proteins and fat. Like
Sure.
my mom, I would come back home and my mom was like, I made this beautiful risotto with taleggio and radicchio. And I was like, awesome, I'll have it. Or, like something else. And like, it wasn't even a question in my mind. I was just like, this food is delicious, is nourishing. I'm going to eat it. While when I moved in New York, I started not only to, like see my body changing and getting out of control, but also trying to understand ways to control it. So I started going into the rabbit hole of like the carbohydrates and the proteins and the fat and the percentage of, okay, like, and those were the years of like, carbs are bad. Like if you eat carbs at night, you're going to get fat. So that was the year, so I started kind of like eliminating certain types of foods, certain types of carbs, because like, oh, that is not clean, and I started also controlling what I was eating. So at night, it wasn't asking my mom, so what's for dinner? It was me having to decide, what am I going to have? And instead of listening to my body and feeling like, okay, what does my body want? It was, what am I supposed to want? I'm supposed to want a piece of salmon and some veggie. And that's been kind of like, and the control part, it was very much the point of it. It wasn't the food, it was the control. And then, I feel that like, especially going into then the ultra running, sometimes these kind of like tendency come back up, because there is a lot of wanting to control your performance and thinking, okay, like I know that if I want to perform well, I need to have a certain amount of carb, protein, and fat. And that is, like obviously sometimes you need to do that to kind of like perform at your best. But I just love being able to go to a restaurant and not worrying about, oh, let me order a plate that has, exactly this amount of carbs, exactly this amount of protein. I just want that burger because that sounds delicious. And I don't care how much percentage of my performance plate is going on here,
100%. Yeah, no, for sure. And so how long were you in New York for?
Initially, for a year.
Okay. And you mentioned that you're married. When did that happen?
Actually, that happened. I met my husband in London. It's funny because he lived in New York the same time I was in New York. We lived 1 block from each other, but we never met. And actually, when we were in London, we met. And he's American, and so we lived in London together for a while. And then with COVID, he decided that he wanted to change his career, and I wanted to go back to the US. So we decided to move to the US. And first, because it was COVID, we stayed in Maine for a while, because we just had like a beautiful house there in the middle of nowhere. And then when things started opening back up again, we wanted access to a city. And also I needed to be closer to LA for my job. So Salt Lake it was. And it just kind of like fueled even more our passion for ultra running and just pushing the boundaries of what we can do.
Wow, that's awesome. See, that's another thing we share. I met my husband in London as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Is he American?
Yes.
Okay.
I always joke with people that I'm Jewish, and I never really dated anyone Jewish. And it took me going to London to like meet my, quote unquote, nice Jewish boy in like a pub in London. And then that's how I found that guy. So that's pretty funny. Anyway.
And you guys moved back to the US together as well?
Yeah, I dragged him back to New York, and then we eventually went to California, where I'm from. But so at what point, so you kind of got into running in London. At what point did you get into trail and ultra running specifically?
Well, actually here in Salt Lake.
Oh, okay.
because I've always loved the mountains. Like when I was a kid, my dad used to take me on beautiful hikes where we had our mountain house. But because I lived in London, I was running and I loved running, but I just didn't know any better. And the only time that we were going outdoor was more climb actually. But then we moved here to Salt Lake, and I could run on the road, or I could run up that beautiful trail in the middle of the mountains. And I started doing that. And I was like, I like this way more than the roads. And so I just started doing it and doing it more. And what I really loved about it was more like the ability to explore new places. Because, it's been a year and a half that I've been here. And I could go on a new trail every day and still not have seen all of it. So for me, it's more the exploration part of it, is just going out and be like, okay, let's check out this lake that apparently is over there. Let's see where it is and go find it. And now that, I love to take my dog with me, and it's kind of like feels like a little adventure where we're just going in the wilderness and seeing where we get to.
That's awesome. What is the elevation of Salt Lake? Is it at elevation?
Oh, yeah. Let me just check.
Okay, I'm just curious. I'm like terrible with elevation, but it's like
4,000,
okay.
40, almost 4,200 feet.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I knew it was at elevation of some kind. I just wasn't sure how
Yeah,
high. Okay.
it's at elevation. Yeah. And
have you found that challenging, kind of adjusting to living and training at elevation?
not so much. Like I feel like a lot of people that come here, like especially during like the speed goat, or the people that go to Park City, which actually it's higher up, they struggle more. But because Salt Lake is not as at high elevation as places like Park City, like living here gives me like a good baseline for it. And then I loved actually living in a place where it's much drier, because here it gets really hot, but it's so dry that, I love being able to train in the heat, and I don't feel that my body is as much affected by it.
Mm-hmm. Got it. And at what point did you start working with a dietitian? Because I know you mentioned you found someone locally to help with your nutrition and specifically the disordered eating. So yeah, can you explain a little bit how that came to be?
So yeah, I started working with a dietitian about like 4 months ago, probably, because I just noticed that still there were these patterns. Like it was never like full on eating disorders, but there were patterns that kept repeating. And especially when I was going through like some stress in my life, some like work issue or family issues, like I was always coming back to those things. And, I was always, every time that something bad happened, I was kind of responding as, okay, I need to control more. I need to, eat less. I don't deserve to eat these other things because they're not perfect type of, and that felt really, really trapping for me. Like I didn't like the fact that I had these thoughts, and then it was making sometimes going out challenging for me. It was making going to restaurants challenging because if I didn't know the menu before, if I didn't find a dish that I knew I was gonna order, I wasn't gonna go because it wasn't perfect. It wasn't what I wanted. And if I ended up ordering something that wasn't as good as I was expecting, it was causing me a lot of anxiety. So I just decided that I had enough, that I couldn't live like this, especially with the ultra running. I felt like I was trying to get my nutrition right, but I wasn't allowing my body to have enough on a daily basis. So I was like, okay, like there's no point in eating all these gels and bars if during the day I'm not fueling properly and I'm not allowing my body to just like have whatever it wants to tell, like it wants. That was the biggest part. I wanted to be able to listen to my body, because I wasn't listening to my body anymore. I just found out that I was eating things that I told myself were, good, and I was avoiding things that I told myself were bad. But I just wanted to listen to my body. And that's why I started working with a dietitian, and it's been really, eye-opening, because we're not focusing on weight or, types of food. She's not giving me like a number of calories or a number of carbs to eat a day. She's just trying to work on my mental blocks to then allow me to naturally incorporate more carbohydrates, more fat, more calories in general. And that's been working really well. And again, like one example is going on the rim to rim to rim and finding out that I love white bread and and I just need that. And then I went on and did a great race just on white bread and felt amazing.
So in your mind before, white bread was in that category of like, I'm not allowed to have this because it's white bread versus whole wheat or something like that?
Exactly. The kind of like the cleaner carb, the more, the less, it digests slower and it's more wholesome and it has more fiber. And, white bread is bad. And especially if it's like salty and processed. It was, but there is a place for those type of foods, and that place is when you're training a lot or in a race. But also, like, it's not about finding a place for it, it's just really not thinking about it. It's being able to go and eat it and not thinking, oh yeah, I can have it because I'm trained. No, yeah, I can have it because I like white bread. and
yes.
It's more like that, like it's more trying to get free from food rather than adding focus on it. And through that, just having a more natural relationship with food, because food is a very big part of our life. Food is a very big part of my life as an Italian. And I feel that the reason why I went back to controlling it is because, especially in my family, there has always been a lot of pressure around food. There has always been, eat more, eat this, and then when I started losing weight, when I started becoming an ultra runner and having this disorder eating, my parents went on the kind of like other side of the spectrum where it was like, we're just going to force feed you. And, that caused a lot of problems with us, because that's not how you solve it. You're just like, why are you not eating this? Eat this. And it's like, that's not how it works.
But it's a lot more complicated than that.
And that's why I'm working with a dietitian, because I felt like I was like, that started to also create some problems with my family where they just couldn't like help me anymore. And the way to help me was them telling me, oh, you had such a beautiful body when you were a volleyball player and now look at you. And I'm like, that is not helpful. That is definitely not.
That is so rough. Yeah.
It's, like, you were so beautiful and, you need to flourish again. And I'm a 32-year-old woman, married woman. Like, I don't need my parents to tell me that I need to flourish again, And so that's why I just started working with a dietitian, because also I didn't want this to become an issue in my relationship with my family. I wanted to just be able to be free from it, and also handle that relationship where if they were to tell me something, I was able to respond in a very mature way instead of just shutting them out and telling them like to basically get lost.
Yeah. So was this an issue basically from New York until recently, or was there like was it ebbing and flowing? Because I know you said it started in New York and then you were in London for 9 years and then you've been in the States for several years and you only recently sought treatment. So what did that look like?
Definitely ebbing and flowing. Like, it was definitely triggered by hardship. Like, when I first moved to London, especially, because it was very hard for me because I didn't want to go. I wanted to stay in New York. I had the best time there, but my visa expired. So I had to go to London, and that was really hard. And again, I went back to like extreme control of my food. And then I started making some friends, and, you start getting like accustomed to the city. So I was getting better, but then something would happen, like a job issue or, like a breakup, something. And I was going back to it. And it was really kind of like ebbing and flowing. And then it got really bad with COVID, because during COVID, unfortunately, My husband actually came to the US before me, but because of COVID, I couldn't come. And for
Oh
9 months,
man.
we were apart. And I
Oh, that's so
was
rough.
alone, basically, because if you have friends in
Yes.
London, you know that COVID in London was horrendous. Like, we weren't
Yes.
allowed out, we weren't allowed to do anything. And so for 9 months, I was basically alone in my apartment with no interaction beside like Zoom calls with my work. And that was my day. And so obviously control was all I had. And setting that routine, setting those things was literally was making the day go by. And so that became really bad there. But then finally I came to the US. I'm with my husband. I'm in a city that I love. And the reason why I seek treatment now is because I got worried because I'm still sometimes going back towards
Yeah.
those mechanism, towards those little things that like and I before I was like, okay, I'm going through something. I realized that this is like it's a survival mechanism that I am implementing. But now it's kind of like it's still there even if there is no reason. So I decided to start working with a dietitian to understand how to unlock it. How to be like, okay, we can let go of this now. Let's let go of this now. But it's not as easy to say like, oh, I'm good now. Like it takes a lot of work and a lot of exposure and trying different things. But it's been going really, really well, and I'm really, really pleased that I work with her.
That's awesome. And let's shout out your dietitian. What's her name again?
Her name is Josie at iRods Nutrition,
Awesome.
and
Awesome.
she's a Salt Lake local. And
Yeah.
she specializes in disordered eating and eating disorder. Like the sport, like nutrition is something, because I was gonna go with with more like a sports nutrition, but then I was like, I don't think I'm gonna be able to work with a sport nutritionist if I first don't solve my mental issues. Because
Yeah.
even if they tell me to eat this amount of calories or this amount of
Yeah.
things, like if I'm not
Yeah.
able to do it, there's no point.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And, there are a few things going on here that I think of. I mean, a while back you were talking about, you can eat all the gels and the bars and all the stuff, but you need to kind of figure out your daily nutrition. And that reminds me all the time of what I tell my own athletes, and I remind myself of just, in my own training is like, your daily nutrition, your everyday nutrition is the foundation of everything. And if
Yeah.
that is not in a good place, if you are, because I mean, think about it, like whatever physical activity you're doing, is certainly if you're an endurance athlete, that increases your energy demands, it increases your carb needs, protein needs, many micronutrient needs. And, if you are not getting enough in, and particularly not enough total energy, like forget the performance nutrition piece. It's kind of like a moot point. You're not going to be feeling great. So yeah, absolutely kind of working on those roadblocks for you and figuring that piece out is so important. And the other thing, it's all very nuanced and challenging, kind of finding food freedom as an athlete, right? And particularly for you, because you mentioned that you're trying to go pro as a runner. Because yes, we want to eat what our body craves, and we want to, listen to our bodies. At the same time, we know that there are times where we can't just listen to our body if we truly want to get enough in and recover well and really dial things in. So it's always this kind of little bit of a balance between, yes, I want to honor my cravings and honor my body, and particularly where there is any disordered eating or eating disorder history, like we'd have to just be like so careful there. And at the same time, if you really want to dial in your nutrition, we do calculate things. We do give some guidance. We do try to hit certain targets, right? So I think it's always a tricky thing, especially for people who are still struggling in that space or trying to find their footing, So just kind of throwing that out there.
Absolutely. And like I think it's more about trying to get into the mindset that it doesn't have to be perfect every day. Like, if
100%.
when I'm training, I am very conscious about my nutrition, so I'm sure to have like a good breakfast before, 2 hours before, and then I know that I'm gonna have my protein shake after. Like, I have those things in place, and I try to be very good about them when I'm in like a big training block. But then it's also about, if on a Wednesday night my husband tells me to go out, or my friend invites me over for dinner, I don't want to be the person that has to worry about, no, actually, because tomorrow I have this long run, so tonight I'm going to have this amount of carbs and proteins and fats.
Yes.
I want to be able to just be like, sure, what are you going to cook? Like pasta? Awesome. Like, and just go and enjoy that moment, and thinking that, yeah, maybe if she makes a big, like Mexican chili, maybe I'm not going to feel super great in the morning run, but
yes,
it's okay. Like, it's like, it's the consistency that brings progress. It's not that every single day has to be perfect.
Totally.
And
Absolutely.
I think that's kind of like the biggest thing that I'm learning now, that there is a place for performance. There is a place for eating kind of like perfect for your performance and getting out and getting that hard workout. And that's great. But there is also a place for, you know what, today I really don't feel it. I might go for a hike with my dog. And, I was supposed to put in this type of workout. It's fine. Or, yes, tomorrow I'm supposed to put in this long run, but my friend really wants me to go out with her and she really needs me right now. So right now that's more important, and I can put my long run in a couple of days. It's that type of freedom that I think it's really important.
Yeah. Are you working with a run coach as well?
No, I'm not. I like doing, as I said, like, I love doing different things, and I love just also like the freedom that I have, because I'm a freelance. So for me, like, it's really hard to create a set, week. Like, I don't have a 9 to 5. Sometimes my meetings are really, really early, like at 7 a.m. because I'm meeting someone in London. And so I have to put my run at 4 a.m. or at, later. And other days I am free until 12. So I'm just going to go in the mountain for 5 hours. So that kind of works for me. And, before I was trying to go pro. Now, after my injury, I'm kind of like reconsidering it, also because going pro while trying to work on your disordered eating might not be the best strategy. So I kind of took a step back, and I decided, okay, I'm going to work on the disordered eating first, and then we'll see how I feel about it.
And the injury, is that the accident that you had in the mountains?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, you had a pretty scary accident that later proved to be incredibly dangerous and basically almost killed you, as you said. So,
yeah.
Can you share that story with us?
So, yeah, I mean, it was just like a regular morning when I was on a trail with my dog, not even like a very challenging one. And I was running downhill, so it wasn't very technical. So I was actually getting quite a bit of speed. And I caught a foot and fell on my left side. And I have a terrible balance. Like, this happens all the time to me. I'm no new to falling. So I got up. I'm a bit beaten up. I don't feel really good. And my left side is really hurting. And I was worried, like, did I, did something to my rib? This is really bad. But I was able to walk my car, go back home, shower, started working. And, like, I was doing the very, like, endurance athlete type of thing where it's like, I'm fine. Like, we are endurance athlete. We are used to pain. Falling in the mountain is just part of the process. But 3 hours later, I started fainting just like started fainting. And thank God my husband was home, because he could, come and find me. And I could not stand upright that I would faint. And so we called an ambulance. They took me to the hospital, and they found that I actually ruptured my spleen in that fall, and I was bleeding internally. And at that point, I already lost a third of my blood.
Oh my God.
So they, rushed me to do surgery, and thank God they were able to, save my spleen. And I've spent 3 days in the ICU. And then after 4 days, I was able to get out of the hospital. But obviously, my body was pretty floored after losing that much blood and all that. So I couldn't train for like over 2 weeks. And
how long ago was this?
This was 2 months ago.
Oh my gosh.
Just before this, yeah.
Oh, that was recent. Wow.
Very recent. And, once again, though, I learned how to trust my body. And, after the hospital, I'm someone who previously struggled with rest days. When I had that injury, I came back home and I had to basically stay in bed for 2 weeks. Like my body just could not, like even a walk around the block felt like a massive achievement to me in those days. And, I needed to trust my body. I needed to trust that my body was repairing. And I was trying to, I listened to a few of your episodes about injury and, like the importance of nutrition when you're going through an injury. So I was very careful to like eat enough, eat more, eat a lot of protein to kind of help my body. But I just had to trust my body to just heal itself. And it did. And, I came back and obviously like, I had to pick up the training slowly. Also because the spleen injury caused a massive issue with my stomach, because it was like my stomach was just getting all irritated because of the blood that I had in my body. And so eating was very hard. But, I was very motivated and I wasn't going to let this be a moment of losing even more weight. And so in 2 months, I was able to then go and run Speed Goat and actually invent something that I maybe sometimes will help also other runners, because when I fell, they told me that I couldn't trail run anymore. Because I couldn't risk having another hit to my spleen. It would have been, because they saved it. So they were like, if you take another hit, if you take another fall, you're done. We're going to have to take it out. But obviously, I had Speed Goat. I wanted to train. I wanted to go in the mountains are my happy place. I wasn't going to give up to that. And so I was trying to find a spleen guard, something that would protect my spleen. And the problem is that those type of gear, they exist only in sports like football, combat sports, sports that are, like very violent and predominantly male driven, big men. I am not a big man. I am a tiny woman. And so I was able to contact the company who was making this gear so that they could send me only the plate for the spleen. And then I basically built my own spleen guard. And that's how I was able to race, because, having my own spleen guard.
Wait, so what is a spleen guard? Is it like a hard piece of something, like where your spleen, like wrapped around your body, where your spleen is?
Basically, it's a hard plate that just covers your rib where your spleen is, and then I bought kind of like a wrapper to just keep it there, because I needed it to be solid, but I also needed it to be light to run in. And it works really well. And now I don't go anywhere without my spleen guard. Like, especially.
Is it uncomfortable?
Not really. No, I almost don't feel it now. Obviously, you're kind of getting hot because it's not a beautiful, technical shirt, but it worked.
You'll have to come up with some different fabrics and cut up like an old tech T-shirt or something and like fashion it into something.
Exactly. I need to. I'm gonna scale it, and like. And I was trying to make it into like my new business. I'm gonna sell spleen guards, and then I realized that not a lot of runners are so special to rupture their spleen. Well, maybe
I have no idea.
Get here. I don't know.
Yeah, I know. Well, hey, if any listeners have ruptured their spleen, please reach out. We're curious who else has done this.
Yeah, exactly.
And do you need a spleen guard? Wow, yeah, that's not something I've heard of, and that's terrifying. Wow, that's so scary. Well, I'm glad that all worked out, and I am really amazed that you were able to run Speed Goat so soon afterwards.
And
Wow.
also,
So,
the reason why I kind of like to share this story, it's also because I feel like in the ultra running community, there is a lot of toughen up. Like, pain is
mm-hmm.
normal. Pain is like, sought for even because we are doing incredible things. And like, it's just that type of like keep pushing. While there are certain moments where you shouldn't. And that's exactly what happened to me. When I fainted, my husband came into the room and I was like, no, I'm probably just like tired from the run. And he was like, no, you've never fainted before. Like, you're not tired. There's something wrong. So I think that it's kind of like important to notice again, like listen to your body because it knows. It knows what you're doing and it will stop you if you don't stop.
Yeah, 100%. So before we move on from, I want to ask a couple more questions about working with your dietitian. Like, what are you guys working on now in terms of, or where are you at, do you feel like, in your road to recovery from disordered eating and the types of things you're working on right now? And also, are you working with a therapist in conjunction to kind of work on some of the more like control stuff and the emotional side of things, or are you primarily just working with a dietitian?
I am primarily working only with her because it's been working really well. Where every week we meet and we kind of check in on the week, and it's not always only about food. It's about just like the training, the challenges of the week, the routines, the control.
Sure.
So she's very well knowledged in that in terms of like being able to talk about everything, and food is a part of it.
Yes.
And so, at the beginning, we kind of like set like a few challenges to it. Like every week, she gives me some little challenges. So I'm like, okay, like I know that this week, like you've been invited by your friend for dinner, and I know that you have a long run the next day. Do you think you could go to the dinner and maybe move your run? And so she gives me suggestions on how to be more flexible and how to like be able to expose myself to these things. Or, like I know that you have a date night with your husband. Why doesn't he choose the place and doesn't tell you where it is? And you just show up and you're gonna find something that you like. And that's, like that causes a lot of anxiety for someone who has a lot of control issues, where I wanna go to this place because I know I wanna have that dish because I've heard that the place is amazing and I read the reviews. Like, instead of just showing up and being confident that you will find something that you like. And even if you don't, it's still a wonderful night with your husband. It's kind of like understanding that not everything has to go to rotate around food. And I think that's the point of working on your food relationship, is understanding that it's a big part of your life, but it doesn't have to be everything. It doesn't have to be all your life rotates around, because there are people who obviously are not nourishing enough, or who are not like scheduling meals enough in like the right amount of like time to training. But then there are people who take it to the extreme, where if they don't have this amount of calories exactly 2 hours before and then after, I don't think it's sustainable. And it's quite liberating to be able to just enjoy food for what it is, which is, yes, it's fuel, it's nourishment, but it's also pleasure.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that was bringing me to my next question, which is, you mentioned you're writing a cookbook with your mom, and which sounds really awesome. How far along are you guys in this project, and what kinds of recipes can we expect to see in it?
Oh, well, we are currently actually trying to kind of take it to publishers at the moment, and we've been having some good responses so far. So the idea for this cookbook is because, as I said, me and my mom, we always enjoyed like cooking together, and that was kind of like our way to be together. And obviously, when I moved away, we didn't have that anymore. And especially during COVID, we couldn't even see each other. We couldn't visit each other. And so our way to be together was to actually share recipes and cook together and keep sharing, like she would send me her things, and I would send her some of my maybe more like international recipes or ingredients that I found that she never heard of before, because Italy is not very like diverse in terms of food. And so we came up with this idea of a cookbook that basically has Italian recipes from her, Italian regional recipes. So not your, usual pizza or pasta carbonara. It's stuff that she developed through the years that are very northern, very regional. And then my international take on them. And, through the book, there is a lot of talking about our travels, our story, and also some nutrition tips, because obviously for me, nutrition has changed. While before in Italy, it was just food. Now it's obviously fuel. It's a big part of my life. So I always, try to incorporate recipes that are also maybe a bit more tailored to athletes, maybe, like that have a good balance of your performance plate, or some recipes that I found for amazing pre-race snacks or post-race meals that really work.
Hey everybody, if you're enjoying this episode, you can support me in a few ways. First, you can subscribe to the show if you haven't already done so. You can rate and review the show and also share it on social media or with your friends. And lastly, if you would like to support my work financially, I have a Patreon page that I link to in the show notes, as well as on my Instagram profile. And I also have an Amazon storefront and a general affiliate link that you can use to do all your normal shopping. All of this supports me and helps keep this show going, especially while I'm in the process of growing the show and trying to find some sponsors. So thank you so much, and let's get back to the episode.
And so, we're very excited. We have an Instagram page for now that it's been doing fairly well, and we're building on that to do a cookbook.
That's so fun. Does the cookbook have a name yet?
Yeah, it's Like Mother, Like Daughter.
Oh,
and
cute.
The Instagram page is called Like Mother, Like Daughter as well.
Awesome. Okay. Well, if anyone wants to check it out, there you go. It's super fun. So right now, do you follow any kind of eating patterns? Do you eat all foods? It sounds like you are very flexible with your eating. And we don't necessarily have to go through what a typical day looks like or anything like that. But is there anything you would share or like to share about kind of what your everyday eating looks like right now?
I have to say, like, my everyday eating is pretty like standard, I have to say. I always try to have like a good breakfast for sure. Like, it's one of those things that I learned, especially going through like disordered eating and some amenorrhea. Like, the biggest thing that I can do for my body is not do any workout fasted. So I generally tend to have a big breakfast, and I'm Italian, so we love sweet breakfast. So it's generally some sort of like yogurt with granola and peanut butter, or like a pastry, those, like, that's the Italian breakfast could be cake, to be honest. And then throughout the day, I'll have like some snacks, some protein bars, some biscuits. Italians dip biscuits in coffee with their coffee, so that has to be part of my day always. And then lunch is generally some sort of like things that I can put together quickly while I'm working. So it's, like, it can be like an omelette, it can be like a big salad with a lot of like proteins and potatoes and bread and avocado. And then dinner generally varies quite a lot, and it's more like what we have in the freezer that day, or what are we feeling like, what can we find in the supermarket, because a lot of the stuff that I used to cook in Italy is not available here. And so it's also learning new flavors, new things. And I'm recently been on a black garlic kick for some reason. That's really good. Nice. On fish. So that's been definitely, like, I've been putting black garlic everywhere in my house, and my husband is not super pleased, but
when you aren't eating plain bagels, what are some of your favorite sports nutrition products?
I have been doing really well with the Morton gels, the non-caffeinated ones, just because those are just like very easily digestible, and I don't like sweet when I'm running that much. I tend to crave salt quite a bit. So I will alternate some sort of like the gel with the bagels, and then also some of the Lara bar sometimes with something sweet. And also the peanut butter pretzel. Those are my, like, I could have 20 of those. Honestly, they're so good.
Excuse me.
Oh, you're good. And so yeah, generally I found that like salty stuff works well for me during sports, and then paired with like some sort of electrolytes with some salt in it as well, like the Element recently have been working really well for me.
Awesome. And what challenges do you still face with your nutrition, do you think, right now, whether it's everyday or performance nutrition?
I feel like I struggle sometimes to like understand if I'm eating enough or not. Because when you're like doing a race or like a training, you can start with a certain amount of gels and a certain amount of calories, and you know how much you've been taking. Because at the end of the run, you will end up with wrappers or half-eaten things, so you will know how much you took. And so one part of the challenge is also making sure that I take enough during those training sessions. But then the challenge is also like during a day-to-day, like understanding, okay, like I need to eat more carbs, but what is more carbs? What, like, do I need to eat half like another piece of toast, or do I need to eat 2 cups of rice? Like, it's kind of like finding that balance between like making sure that I eat intuitively, but it also I eat enough for the training that I'm doing, and to adapt my eating to the training volume. Because I have the very bad habit of no matter my training volume, I kind of eat similar every day. And, obviously, if it's a big day, then maybe I'll have a bigger dinner, but it never completely changes. And so that's something that I've been trying to understand how to navigate a bit more.
Yeah, and this is where it goes back to what I was saying earlier, where it's like it is really tricky to kind of find that balance between, as you said, kind of eating the things you want and being flexible and all that, but then kind of doing some calculations based on your current weight and going based on these research-based guidelines and stuff like that, because they are out there. We can calculate, the gram per kilogram amounts of carbs that you roughly, like the ranges and the protein and all that stuff, but you don't want to be counting everything. So, I mean, I know for the way I like to work with people, like I definitely don't want them counting every single gram, but we can like ballpark and guesstimate things in ways and kind of throw things into units and like, oh, a slice of bread is 1 unit and you need X many, it's like, So that's how I try to balance it out. But I know everyone works differently and it's very tricky. And I know for myself, I definitely, even as a sports RD, have been in a place where I'm 100% under fueling, and not intentionally at all. It's just, I wasn't on top of my nutrition enough, right? So it is, I think, very easy to do. And particularly for people who are running high volume, who are doing a lot. So yeah, it is one of those things that you really have to stay on top of if you want to prevent yourself from being in a low energy availability state, for sure.
Absolutely. And something that has been working really well with my dietitian is that instead of giving me, like a specific amount of carbs or protein or fat, she just gives me like the handfuls, So she will be like, okay, like I know that you had a handful of protein, a handful of carb, and a handful of veggie. Can you just have another handful of carbs with that plate?
Exactly.
And so she doesn't focus on like what type of carbs it has to be, it has to be rice or potato or whatever. She just grab another handful and just put it in the plate. And then, seeing also how I'm gaining weight, it's a good kind of like indicator of what is working, what is not, and the fact that I'm gaining weight very naturally without any sort of like anxiety but the fact that I am gaining even at my peak training, like, training for the speed goat, I've put in some of the biggest mileage weeks I've ever put in. And I still gained 10 pounds, which for me was a proof that, okay, this is working,
Absolutely. Yeah. And 100%, like we're always trying to see like, what is your baseline intake right now? And so we see what that is. And then, hey, let's add a little bit more. And then if you don't want to use the concept of a handful, you could do a serving spoon. I mean, there's so many ways to do that. And this is where individualized nutrition work it really comes into play, because some people are great with ranges of numbers and some people it's just not an appropriate thing to give them. So it's just kind of figuring out for each person what they need and what works best, because some people love numbers and it's not a problem and they're fine with it, and other people it really stresses them out. So yeah, and this is why we individualize, work with people. So you're a screenwriter. Will we be seeing any of your work anytime soon? Kind of what is your career looking like right now? Not to put you on the spot.
My career isn't looking very good right now because of the writer's strike.
That's right. I totally forgot about that.
So,
yes, the writer's strike.
That's been like a lot of time to train. But
yes.
No, it's been a great journey, and I've been on some shows, some maybe like a British audience will we recognize them more, like Gangs of London on AMC. And I've been working for a few sports documentaries as well, but yeah, lately with the writer's strike, everything is obviously paused, and which it's summer, I have time to train, but I'm looking forward to going back to like working, and I'm using this time to focus on things like my book that I'm doing with my mom, and just other projects that are not related to screenwriting.
Yeah. And do you have any other races or adventures kind of coming up for you after Speed Goat?
Yes, actually, in a couple of weeks we are doing the Teton Crest Trail.
Oh, neat!
Because I feel like I love doing races, but I love even more just like taking things off the list, like going on big adventures. So like when we did the rim to rim to rim, or I want to do the Zion Traverse, and like just being able to accomplish these routes and at my own pace, at my own, like not having to like worry about the race time or a lot of people around me. I just want to do it because I want to complete it. And so, yeah, in a couple of weeks, we're doing the Teton Crest Trail, which is going to be really exciting, challenging, because there's no like water sources. Like the water is all like natural water. So we're going to have to bring water filters and bear spray, because apparently there's loads of bear out there, and I'm trying to think like, where am I gonna fit the bear spray in my vest with all the bagels that I have? Like, it's bagels or bear spray, I don't know.
Yeah, bagels are not a very compact way to get 60 grams of carbon. That's the only problem, but yes, they are delicious. Oh, yikes. Okay. And your husband is a trail runner as well?
Yeah, he's a trail runner as well, and joins me in all these adventures. And we've been having, actually he kind of got me into it because I got him into road running, and then when we moved here he started doing more of the trail running, and I was like, that looks fun. Also, we're very like competitive in a very healthy way, but we just, let's say we push each other a lot. And so and that's why also I feel like the adventures are a bit more fun, because there's no like, like for Speed Goat, we were like, okay, the loser buys a meal to the winner, and for this one, it's just like, no, we're going to stay together. We're going to chat. We're going to, have this experience together.
Yeah. Oh, that's so awesome. I love it. All right. Well, we're going to wrap up with my quick bites questions. So what is your favorite post-race meal or snack?
I love steak. I love a big fat steak on the grill. And so, I mean, it's not even a post race. Like, honestly, like, I feel like at least once a week I will have it. But if I've done a race, it's going to be pretty big. And, like a big steak with like roast potatoes and loads of butter. Like, after big efforts, I crave fat quite a lot. So, those little, like the fat bits on the steaks, like some people don't eat them. Like, I will eat everyone else's. Like, it's just like what I crave. And so that's probably my favorite, like, post-race meal.
Awesome. What is your biggest cooking catastrophe, if you've had one?
Ooh, I think I had one, actually. Yes. One day I was cooking some burgers. And, I used to keep the oil under the cooking oil underneath the sink. But I also used to keep my dishwashing liquid underneath the
Oh
sink.
no.
And I was chatting with my mom actually. And so we were chatting and I just took the dishwashing liquid and I just poured it all over the pan and I started cooking the burgers. And I noticed that they were like, there's something wrong with these burgers. They're doing this like weird white
Bubbles.
foam. That's not good. And then like I kind of like I was looking at them and then I saw the dishwashing liquid outside near the pan and I was like, ooh, that would have been really, really bad. So it was kind of like an almost crisis, I guess, but definitely like could have been pretty catastrophic.
Yeah, those went in the garbage. Oops. What is the most interesting food that you've ever tried?
I think I lived in Africa for a few months, and I remember like probably the best meal I've ever had is that one day they brought over like a small goat that was just literally like, they just killed basically, and we built a pit in the sand, and we roasted the goat right there in the sand on the beach, and then we had it straight off there like with our hands, and that was probably one of the most interesting and just like incredible eating experience I've ever had.
That sounds awesome. Yeah, have I had goat? Yes, I have had goat before. Yeah, I mean it's a very like prized meat in certain countries and cultures, and
And I mean it's pretty common in Italy. It's not something that we would have goats like on a regular basis, but just like having it like that,
yes,
you
totally,
know, like roasted in the sand, it was just incredible.
Totally. How do you like your eggs cooked?
Poached. I like poached eggs because then you get all the oozy goodness that you can scoop up with some good bread.
Yes, totally. What is your favorite beverage?
I will have to say coffee, probably. Yeah. Like a good, and I'm not like a typical Italian. Like I'm not a big espresso person. I need a long black coffee. Like I remember when we moved to Maine, the thing I was most excited about was Dunkin' Donuts because I love their black coffee. And
oh my God. That will make your family cringe
winter,
back home.
during like the Maine, like cold winter. Having
Yes,
a big
yes.
cup of Dunkin' Donuts black coffee was my favorite part of the day.
That's so funny. I love it. What does your mom think of that?
She's not approving that much of that. But, when she came to visit to Maine, though, she was so cold that she was having Dunkin' Donuts. And trust me, she liked it. She definitely was not used to those temperatures.
Totally. What are your comfort foods?
Probably like some sorts of pasta, some sort of like very saucy gnocchi as well. It's something that with a lot of cheese, I tend to gravitate towards like there is a beautiful dish that my mom makes, which is this like gnocchi with the red sauce, but also with the sausage and stracciatella, which is basically the inside of the burrata. And that's something that is just like a warm hug, or any sort of like low cooked meats, like a big low cooked meat.
Do you make your own pasta?
I have done, not recently because I don't have a machine here in the US, but with my mom, we would make our own pasta. And it's so easy, honestly. It's just like, it's just having good ingredients and having the patience to just pull it. But it's so much more rewarding when you eat it.
Totally. What is your favorite ice cream flavor?
Anything that is like dark chocolate. Like I love just like dark. Like if I could have a cake that is just made of ganache, I would have just a ganache cake. So like I would say probably like some sort of like dark chocolate ganache flavor, and it's the gelato as well that is like. But the Ben and Jerry's, like I've been getting into those quite a bit. My husband started me on those. I was like, okay, that's not that bad. It's not gelato, but it's
not gelato.
Still pretty good.
Have you found like a decent gelato company here that you can buy at the store, or is it just like nothing and it's not even worth getting?
I mean, it's not gelato per se. It's very it's a very big difference. But I feel like the Magnum, for example, like those like are pretty good. And we would have them in Italy all the time. And like I've been enjoying the more like fun, the Ben and Jerry's thing, because in Italy when you go for an ice cream, it's a very pure thing. You get like, it's not like the cookies with the cream and the thing. It's just
yes.
It's cream, it's pistachio, it's vanilla.
Yep.
It's very simple, but just very good.
I always think of like fig or melon or like just those amazing like summer fruits, and it's just like, oh,
absolutely, so like peach or like watermelon, and or like the granita, this kind of like heavy, creamy ice thing. And while here you have cookie batter and brownie and caramel and pretzel with a side of marshmallow, and you're like, okay, like give it to me, I'll take it all. But it's definitely different. But as I say, it's kind of like people complain that like, pizza in Italy is so good, and in America is like it's a complete different thing. And it's like, yes, it's a complete different thing. Like like a New York slice has nothing to do with an Italian pizza, but that doesn't mean it's not absolutely delicious. Like I'll go to Domino's Pizza and really enjoy some food there that I wouldn't call pizza myself, but it's still delicious.
Yeah, that's like my whole thing with bagels out here, because just having lived in New York for so long, I just can't with bagels on the West Coast. It's just, at least not in my part of the West Coast. There's nothing. Where do you live in
California?
I'm in Santa Cruz. So maybe in the Bay Area, or I know in LA, like there's some decent bagels, but like immediately in my vicinity, there is nothing you could really call a bagel, and it's just depressing. So I don't even try. But yeah, okay. Now, last question, top 3 items of gear that are most essential to your active lifestyle.
Okay. My running vest, for sure, where I keep all my bagels and the water and all of that. My trail running shoes, and probably my headphones, because even when I'm running in a mountain, obviously I'm not wearing both of them, but I'll have one sometimes just to get me through the long days. So I need to listen to your podcast, I need to listen to some audiobooks, so that definitely always is in my vest.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Alice. It was so great getting to know you, and I'm glad you reached out and wanted to share your story. And, I hope others will be inspired to share their stories as well if they think it's something that they want to share and people might want to listen to. So it's been fun kind of including these more, recreational athlete stories, because I really like to hear from everybody. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, and thank you for having me. It's been really great. And as I said, you've been giving me company for a long run. So I'm really excited to be able to share a bit of my story and keep listening to other people.
Awesome. Well, enjoy your upcoming adventure. I wish you all the best with screenwriting when the strike is eventually over, and good luck with your cookbook.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And that's our show for today. Thank you again, Alice, for chatting with me. And again, if any of you listeners think that you have a story to share, please reach out. My email is claire@eatforendurance.com. You can send me a DM on Instagram. My handle is eatforendurance. Whatever works best for you. I would love to hear from you. And of course, anyone who has topic requests or guest requests or questions, I always love to hear from my listeners. So please reach out. And one last plea to help support the show. Again, as you guys know, I don't have any sponsors right now. I am trying to grow the show to get to a point where I can financially support it, because it does take a lot of time to produce and money. So if you would like to support me and help grow the show, you can subscribe to it. You can share it on social media or with your friends. You can give it a 5-star rating and review wherever you listen. And of course, if you have $1 or so to spare and would like to become a patron on Patreon, I do have that link up in the show notes as well as on my Instagram profile. And you can also, of course, use my general Amazon affiliate link or the storefront to do your shopping. Throw me a few cents when you make some purchases. I really do appreciate it. All right, guys, see you next time.